Bungie's greatest achievement wasn't to make Destiny. It was to make people believe that it's somehow Blizzard's fault that Destiny sucks dick. Now, don't get me wrong. Activision Blizzard and Blizzard in general are complete garbage companies that can't do anything right. Look at their current game lineup, all of them are absolutely failing. World of Warcraft in decline for years. Diablo 4 literally dead. StarCraft who? And Overwatch 2 that's still getting memed upon because Marvel Rivals is just so better at the end of the days. And Bungie somehow sold the idea that it was Activision Blizzard's fault that Destiny is bad. And after leaving, everything became worse. Somehow everything became worse.
I'm not gonna lie, this one hurts. Today we are performing an autopsy on Bungie, one of the most prolific game studios in the entire games industry, one that was largely responsible for popularizing online gaming for casual audiences. Hell, these guys were the ones that brought gaming into the mainstream, and as they rose to the highest of heights, they become nothing more.
Did they? I'm pretty sure that's not even close to true, honestly, but okay.
More than a cautionary tale of greed and mismanagement. This is the same studio that gave us Halo, that built Destiny, that at one point represented the future of the games industry. Yet here we are now, watching them collapse under the weight of their own arrogance, incompetence, endless layoffs, and a community that no longer wants to defend them.
Absolutely deserved.
They went from making some of the most recognized and beloved games in the industry to now being under threat of having their studio taken away and them folded into PlayStation. I don't think that there is a better example of a studio that has wasted its own potential.
By the way, that's already happening. There is absolutely no way the final shape or anything that Bungie is currently doing is going to save them. The final shape already is confirmed to have lower sales than Lightfall. That's right. A literal story completely from start to finish centered around the concept of gay. I wish I was lying, but I'm not. And the final shape with their unibrow villain is doing worse than that. Well, did worse than that. Now, granted, people are more happy with it. The final shape in general is not a bad product per se. Most people are okay with it, but it's the tried and true reality of the world that you can't make 5 expansions in a row that are absolute ass, no one likes, they are anti-consumer, and then be like, oh guys, don't worry, this one's actually good, come and play. No. Like, how did Bungie even think that this is gonna end? That the people who left their game and didn't play for like 3 expansions in a row are just gonna come back and play the final shape and spend $200 extra on all the other stuff that they need to now buy to play it, because you can't just play Destiny with 1 expansion. That's impossible. Of course not. They set themselves up to fail, and fail they did hard. Honestly, Bungie is so incompetent. A Sony and Xbox, a fentanyl addict from the streets takeover would honestly be better what they're currently doing.
Potential, its own talent, its own games, while also simultaneously betraying their audience at every given turn. Cutting content, paywalling things, obfuscation of currencies, stealing fan art. How do you fall that far? How do you fall that hard?
Bungie stealing art? Stories go so hard, by the way. Like, there are other companies that sometimes make something similar, but Bungie just straight up steals it, and they have a history of doing it a lot.
Hard. How do you go from defining the industry to being everything that we hate about it? Well, that's what we're going to find out. Big thanks to Starforge Systems for supporting the channel and sponsoring today's video. They build some of the most powerful custom PCs out there, hand-assembled, stress-tested, and built to last. Whether you want we need to go back to where it all started. Like so many legendary studios, Bungie's story begins really normally, to be honest with you. In the early 90s, Jason Jones and Alex Seropian had met in college in Chicago, and they bonded over a love of games, and they wanted to build games of their own. They cut their teeth on making titles for the Mac, beginning with a game called Nope, a Pong clone that was made before they even created the studio, and then they followed that up with Operation Desert Storm, a dungeon crawler called Minotaur: The Labyrinths of Crete, and then they made their first real FPS game, Pathways to Darkness. But it wasn't until the release of Marathon that Bungie truly had made a name for itself. Marathon was unlike anything that Bungie had built before. Its strange, compelling brand of sci-fi pulled players in, and its vertical level design pushed the experience forward. But what really mattered here was that it came out for Mac, because at the time, shooters and big budget games really
Yeah, and now the new Marathon is dropping, and I the new Marathon is so bad people don't want to even talk poorly about it, okay? It is so absolute modern day Bungie woke, it's insane. Like did we don't even know if you're playing as a man or a woman in Marathon. It's you can't tell. It's just new mailing in the hardest.
just lived on PC or consoles, leaving Mac players starved for options. Bungie filled that void, but in doing so, they ended up building a loyal following that saw their games as proof that Mac gaming could stand alongside the rest. The success of Marathon, followed by Marathon 2 and Marathon Infinity, cemented Bungie as a cornerstone of Mac gaming and gave them their first taste of real mainstream recognition. Following the success of Marathon, Bungie tried their hand at publishing a few smaller titles while quietly developing their next big project, and in 1997 they released Myth, The Fallen Lords, and RTS, and it became their fastest selling game to date. I think the reason why Bungie was so successful at this point comes down to what they themselves described in an IGN documentary. They were young, stupid, idealistic, and above all, ambitious. They weren't just running a corporation. They were a group of friends that were making games that they wanted to play. If you go back and you watch some of the footage of their earlier days, you can see it plain as day. None of these guys were shooting any of these videos with the intention of it being in a documentary. No, they were just running around with camcorders because that's what everybody else did at the time. The office was full of pranks, jokes, and chaos, but underneath it all was a philosophy that drove everything that they had made. They were
Now your average office joke gets you a date with HR, and it's not a pleasant one. It is what it is.
their own customers.
I think it all starts with the idea that we were our own customer and that anybody else who was going to play our games, we were in their shoes.
And the spirit of that was tested almost immediately, because when Bungie released Myth 2, it shipped with a critical issue where the installer was wiping players' hard drives with no patches or day one updates to be able to save them. Bungie
I have no idea what that even means.
then had to recall nearly 500,000 copies and replace them at their own expense. It cost the company millions of dollars and nearly sank the studio, but it showed exactly what kind of company they were. Oh my, how times have changed. That was Bungie when they first started. They were their own customer. They were making games for themselves. And I think when you look at their early success, that makes a lot of sense. I think that you have to be selfish in the games industry. I mean, you have a ragtag group of nerds and geeks that like sci-fi and fantasy games, and that's what they were trying to make for themselves. They weren't thinking about what anybody else wanted them to make. They just wanted to make the games that they themselves wanted to play. We were our own customer. We were in their shoes. That line seems to come up almost every single time I ever talk about either successful developers or ones that are failing, because at the end of the day, I think that that's where success in this industry starts and stops. If you do not understand the perspective of your customers, if you cannot feel what they feel, then how are you supposed to provide anything of value to them? After the financial disaster of Myth 2, Bungie doubled down.
They have not seen what I have seen. The Lord of the Rings of the Power. It's gonna be a call. People are gonna fucking remember that shit. The lines there are just too shit to pass up.
On their next project, Halo, and I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just the financial pressure of these guys almost going under. Maybe they just had the right people at the right time, but their talent went through the roof. Marcus Leto leveled up in art direction. Joseph Staten stepped in as a writer and cinematic lead. Chris Butcher drove the engineering. Chris Barrett refined the visuals. In just a few years, this scrappy Mac studio that was making quirky RTS games and dungeon crawlers was suddenly building something unrecognizable. It jumped so big that honestly, I just don't understand it. Halo debuted at Macworld with none other than Steve Jobs introducing it, and for the reveal trailer, Bungie had brought back Marty O'Donnell, who had scored Myth 2, and they only gave this guy a vague description of a mythical ancient alien world, and what he would then deliver for that trailer is now the most iconic theme in all of gaming, the Halo theme.
That's a lie. No one recognizes this, okay? When you ask someone, it's typically the World of Warcraft logging screen with classic, Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, exactly. You can recognize that bad boy instantaneously. Diablo 2 soundtracks. Just the basic ones. Jeez fucking Christ, that hits hard, okay? Probably... GTA doesn't really... There are others. I have no idea who fucking recognizes the Halo soundtrack, okay? That seems like a lie. I'm sure there are people, but come on.
But even as they pushed forward creatively, Bungie was still deep in financial trouble. They were not good at managing money, they were good at making games, and the impact of the millions lost on Myth 2's launch was finally starting to take its toll. So, following the reveal of the game, they began quietly searching for somebody to acquire them. They knew that Microsoft was preparing to launch a new console, so they reached out to Ed Freeze, head of Xbox. Freeze, completely desperate for talent and flagship titles, jumped at the chance to be able to acquire them. The deal went through, and Microsoft made Halo the centerpiece of its new console. Now, at the time, first-person shooters lived on PC. Games like Doom and Quake thrived on mouse and keyboard precision, and most people doubted whether or not first-person shooters could even work on console. Halo Combat Evolved ended up launching on the Xbox, and it proved everybody wrong. Its tight controls redefined what shooters could be on the platform, setting the standard for how FPS games would feel on consoles even today. When Halo released, I don't know, man, this game was an enigma. Its campaign and PvP were perfect, and you just had never played anything like it before. And its LAN-enabled multiplayer just created this instant community around it. We'd hook up multiple Xbox consoles for 16-player matches. It just became the game that everybody wanted to get together to play. And it wasn't just about playing the game, it was about the shared memories that that game brought with it. But this is also the moment where things took an unexpected turn, because after the release of Halo and during the development of Halo 2, Bungie's priorities began to shift. And I'd argue that this is the moment where everything changed for them, because remember, Bungie was a Mac first developer with a loyal audience that carried them through their early years. They would not be where they were without them. The original agreement they had for Halo was for that game to be multi-platform, and Microsoft had already commissioned Gearbox to port the game to PC and Mac. But then Microsoft and Xbox's marketing team, along with Bungie's own manager under Microsoft, Pete Parsons, canceled the ports, forcing the game to be exclusive. Now, I'm not saying that this betrayal of the PC and Mac fans was the sole reason for Bungie to go down the wrong path, but this is the moment where control started to slip, when making games stopped being about the players who got them there and started being about something else entirely, something that only got worse with the development of Halo.
So, Bungie effectively lasted one game? That's what you're kind of telling me? That's even worse than the reality.
2. Bungie wanted to push Halo 2 further than anything that they had done before, but the project slipped into chaos. Deadlines started slipping, Microsoft's patience started to run dry, and executives were reportedly pressuring the developers to sleep in their own offices just to keep the machine moving. The same group of nerds that were...
Good, based. A happy programmer is not a programmer doing all that he can, okay? We need a... I'm not saying slavery's good, by the way, but programmer slavery should be probably adopted as a household true, okay? The companies would be more happy, the players would be more happy, everyone would be more happy if, you know, programmers actually were forced to love the things that they are doing. That sounds pretty good, right? Forced to love, huh? I'm down with that.
Once making games for themselves, were now getting
a little bit of slavery never hurt anybody.
Crushed under
I'm joking, YouTube. I'm joking.
Corporate schedules. Bungie asked for another year, but Microsoft said no. For Bungie, this wasn't just a scheduling issue, it was survival. Rushing Halo 2 risked undoing everything that they had already built, and the standoff between the two got so heated that Ed Freeze, one of Xbox's top leaders, quit the company in frustration. Bungie eventually ended up getting their delay, but they lost their strongest ally, and with him, the last traces of the carefree studio that they used to be. And I think what's crazy is that despite all of this, their talent was still undeniable. Halo 2 was more than just a sequel, it was a cultural event. It sold 2.4 million copies in the first 24 hours. It raked in $125 million, becoming the fastest selling piece of...
Damn, modern day Assassin's Creed can't sell even 1.5 million copies in the first... How long has it been? 3 months? 3 months since Assassin's Creed Shadows has been? Dragon Age from a franchise that's supposed to sell 20 million copies in like a decade to something that can't sell 1 million copies in a year. Sad times.
Media at the time. It was the moment that gaming fully...
But maybe Arthas's father had a point. No king rules forever.
Entered into the mainstream, and beyond sales, Halo 2 revolutionized online multiplayer. Through Xbox Live, players could actually form clans and climb leaderboards and compete in a global community. It wasn't just a continuation of Halo's story, it defined what online gaming could be for consoles, and it cemented Bungie as one of the most important studios in gaming history. But that success came at a cost, because going big time, locking in with Microsoft, abandoning their old Mac audience, even if it wasn't their choice, it reshaped the studio. The Bungie that was once building games for themselves is now tied to something much bigger, and the weight of that partnership.
So, Bungie has a history of constantly betraying fans. Okay. Very nice to know. So, I'm sorry, but I'm not hearing a lot of reasons why I should like Bungie. I'm not hearing them at all, okay? I'm hearing a little bit about what's good about them, but this is all deeply in the past and it's already getting not good.
Was starting to show. The development of Halo 2 was the moment where Bungie finally realized what they had signed up for. Microsoft now has one of the most important games in the industry, and there was no world in which they were going to let Bungie work on anything else. With every release, expectations grew even heavier, and as soon as Halo 2 had shipped, Bungie was pushed straight into Halo 3. Now, on the surface, the development of Halo 3 was going smoothly, but inside the studio, resentment was building. Leadership had already begun whispering about escape and starting talks with Microsoft about going independent, knowing that they had been chained to Halo forever under Microsoft's oversight. And yet, under that pressure, they did it again. In 2007, Halo 3 launched to $170 million in sales in the first 24 hours. Halo 3 was an enormous leap over Halo 2. Powered by the Xbox 360's hardware, visually, it was unrecognizable compared to earlier games. Easily.
Is that when the good days end, by the way? Is Halo 3 the last good thing until Destiny that Bungie has done?
The best looking shooter of the time. Bungie over-delivered on nearly every single front. Forge mode, a revolutionary tool that let us make our own maps and create our own content. Theater mode, where we could record, edit, and share gameplay clips. Dedicated servers that gave multiplayer stability and consistency that we just never even saw on console. And a campaign that stretched even longer than whatever they had made before, delivering some of the most cinematic, satisfying experiences imaginable. But at the height of their success, Bungie was still looking at the exit. Following Halo 3's release, they announced that they were going to be separating from Microsoft, citing a desire to have some creative freedom and return to their roots as an independent studio. Under the deal, Microsoft would retain rights to Halo, while Bungie would continue developing the franchise for a few more years before they fully parted ways. In that stretch, Bungie oversaw Halo Wars, they followed it up with Halo ODST, and finally, in 2010, Halo Reach marked both the studio's farewell to Halo and the end of their official partnership with Microsoft. It was the close of an era. Looking back on it now, it's crazy that despite all the chaos and the
Oh no, was Reach the last good Halo? I don't know, I didn't play Halo.
Pressure that Bungie was under, they never seemed to break. They had already secured their independence from Microsoft. They could have just coasted, quietly quit, or just phoned it in, but instead, every single release, every game they had seemed to just raise the bar even higher. And while Halo 3 might be the most popular entry in the series, Reach was just something else entirely. It showed just how much Bungie had matured and how their skills had developed over the years, and to this day, I do not think that there's been a better FPS story that I have played. Going back to the beginning, delivering Cortana to the Pillar of Autumn, watching the sacrifices of Noble Team unfold, it was devastating, it was emotional, it was unforgettable. Nobody expected Bungie to tell a story like that, and it left an impact that I think still defines them for many fans even today. For a lot of us, Reach wasn't just a farewell to Halo, it was the moment that we remember Bungie forever. I'll be honest with you guys, for some of you folks that watch this channel that are a little bit on the younger side, maybe you guys only know Bungie for Destiny, I'm sorry. It's next to impossible for me to be able to
do we want to remember the good old times? I will say I kind of don't want to remember them, okay? Being lost in the past is never a good thing if you're a gamer, in my opinion. As many of you, I loved pretty much all the old stuff that Blizzard did. When they still had soul, talent, and all of that stuff. But, you know, roughly around the time of Mists of Pandaria, roughly around the time of Diablo 3, they kind of completely just died. And if we would still be hopeful, saying, "Oh no, Blizzard's got this," there's still hope that they deliver a good gaming experience. we would be effectively praising the. We would be one of those mouth breathers who are still trying to praise Diablo 4 as a even game. It's not even a game at this point. It's just a disaster. Being stuck in the past like this, or saying that you need to respect Bungie for making Halo or any of this garbage gobbledygook nonsense, it doesn't slide with me. I don't think something good deserves potential infinity admiration because it did something good once in the past. I don't think that's how we should look at these things. We no longer should judge Bungie by Halo even being their game, honestly. We should judge Bungie by what they are now, and that is Destiny 2, and that is Marathon. That's pretty much it. The Bungie who made things that you liked in the past when you were a kid is gone, and it's gone forever. Same as Blizzard. If you want to be one of those idiotic people who just scream into the void, clutch a fist, and be really angry at the sky and say, "Oh no, they're coming back any moment now, Blizzard's fucking making it." I mean, sure, be one of those people, but don't be surprised when no one takes you seriously and thinks you're an idiot.
Explain just how much their studio and their games meant to gamers worldwide. It's like their existence just made gaming better across the board. It rose the standard for everybody out there. Their storytelling was peerless, their gameplay was flawless, and as a result of that, I think it made the rest of the industry want to do better. They were a company that just kept raising the standard with every single game that they released. And I didn't realize this until I started researching for this video, but I think the reason why we saw such a golden age in the Xbox 360.
Dude, and how dead is actually that type of thinking nowadays. Again, remember, Baldur's Gate 3 came out, and instantaneously there were hundreds of articles saying, "Oh no, gaming is not going to be like this. Gamers should lower their expectations. No game is gonna be as good as Baldur's Gate, so stop asking for it. This is just lucky. No one else is gonna even try this hard." How pathetic is that, honestly?
60 era isn't just because of nostalgia, it's just because Halo was that fucking good. It was impossible to ignore. If you were a company that was making video games, you needed to be learning something off of what Bungie was doing, because if you weren't, you were failing. And I mean, the advancements that Bungie had made just for first-person shooters on a console is just next level. I mean, they brought them to the console in the first place. They brought the entire genre to the console. It's like I said at the beginning of the video, the controls that you play on a controller today are some variation of Halo's controls. You cannot perfect perfection. These guys created a standard. Everybody else had to follow it. But those standards started to shift. The minute that these guys left Xbox was the minute that everything started to fall apart for them. Whether it was indecisiveness, whether it was the financial pressure of them going independent, maybe it was also their changes in leadership. All of the issues that they had that started at the development of Halo and then on started to bear fruit. And the image.
They maybe needed a little bit of diversity in their workplace, okay? A little bit of that women flair of CEO, okay? Every company needs a woman CEO, boys. It is what it is. Ask Cracker Barrel.
And the reputation that Bungie had built for itself was going to fall apart. While Bungie was still working on Halo 3 ODST and Reach, they were also working in the background on a game that they had planned to launch once they had
Ask Mexico.
gone independent, codenamed Project Tiger, later revealed as Destiny. After cutting ties with Microsoft, Bungie then signed a 10-year publishing deal with Activision in 2010. Why did these guys think that was going to be a better deal for them? And it didn't take long for things to spiral out of control. In 2013, only a year before launch, Bungie leadership scrapped the original campaign written by Joe Staten, the veteran who had helped shape some of Halo's most iconic narratives. Staten then left the studio shortly after, and the campaign was rebuilt from fragments, leaving Destiny's story incoherent at launch. When Destiny launched in 2014, expectations were sky high. An MMO shooter.
God, when Destiny launched. By the way, people don't remember how absolutely tragic was the Destiny launch. They had Peter Dinklage, you know, the dwarf from Game of Thrones, that guy, as the voice of Ghost. It was like, "Oh, things happen, I say. Left is left, right is..." Like, Jesus Christ. It was a shit show.
Coming from the studio that never misses. It felt like a dream, but in reality, it was a stumble that nobody ever saw coming. The gunplay was incredible, pure Bungie, but everything else around it was hollow. The story was weak, the content was thin, and the grind was absolutely relentless. It was a fun and frustrating experience.
By the way, my complete 100% unironic opinion about Destiny is that the game's trash in literally every regard. Like, the story of Destiny is pure fucking unadulterated autism. The art direction of Destiny is one of the most saddest, disgusting, putrid things I have honestly seen in my life. Now, granted, that's my opinion. People are going to disagree with that, and that's fine. Because my opinion on this is pretty harsh, not gonna lie, obviously. But the gunplay is lit, brah. The gunplay is where it's at. I fully 100% believe that the only reason Destiny survived for as long as it did was the gunplay. Nothing else. The story, again, unironic, most people don't even know what the fucking story in this garbage dumpster fire is, okay? The story's ass. The new player experience is terrible. Like, people are still making videos about how Destiny is the game that begs its new players to just delete itself from it because it's that bad. Literally, you log into the game and you're already getting a pop-up for something that you're not going to see in the game for 50 more hours. It is a disgrace. The new player experience is not horrible. It is beyond comprehension. Some people need to look up a guide how to bypass a bug in the tutorial that has existed for how long? 3 years now or something like that? It's insane. Destiny purely survives, lives, and breathes by the gunplay. That's it. Everything else about the game is literal garbage in my completely honest opinion. I hate the art direction. Every single alien species looks like my fucking trash can just grew legs and started talking nonsense. It is insanely poor.
Experience at the same time, a game that felt great to play but gave you nothing meaningful to do. Bungie's support really didn't help the situation either. Content drops dragged on, balance patches absolutely gutted some of the most popular weapons in the game, and over time it just became less fun to play. Expansions like the Dark Below and House of Wolves added scraps that felt more like cut content from launch, while the Taken King finally delivered the overhaul that players wanted all along, but only behind another paywall. By then, the sense was already clear. Destiny had not launched unfinished by accident. Bungie was selling back the missing pieces later. Oh, I remember being so mad about this. The Dark Below was an absolute ripoff. Crota's End was a cool raid, but that expansion was just like one strike, a couple story missions, and a couple PvP maps. It all felt like cut content that should have been there since day one. Same thing goes for House of Wolves. By the time Taken King came along, yes, that was actually worth it. It finally made the game feel like the Destiny that was always pitched to us. But then Bungie comes in and puts in the Eververse store, bringing in microtransactions into a fully priced game with expansions. And that was like somebody walking into a 5-star restaurant and taking a shit on the table that you're eating at. You can ignore it, but you can still smell it. Now, I'll say this, maybe it's speculation, but I do not think that timing was a coincidence. This had Activision's fingerprints all over it, and likely Pete Parsons as well. Remember, Parsons was Bungie's manager under Microsoft. After leaving Xbox, he came back to Bungie later on to be their head of marketing, and not long after the Eververse store appeared, he was named CEO of the company. From that point forward, the influence of Activision and Parsons' leadership steered Bungie in a direction that would slowly but decisively erode everything that studio once stood for. I think it's worth pointing out just how fast their priorities had flipped. Think about...
Was that just a black screen? What I think it was. Wow.
Where we started. This is a company that valued their independence, that wanted to make the games that they wanted to play, that shared the perspective of their...
It sounds like this it honestly sounds like, by what he's saying, that Bungie didn't know what they're doing. Because you leave Microsoft and instantaneously write a deal that effectively makes you now the slave of Activision. Bro, how does that even make sense? How does that make sense? Like, what the fuck do you think you're gonna do there? It sounds like leadership was completely clueless on what's actually happening.
Audience because they were their audience. But the minute that they broke free of Microsoft, they immediately and just went and handed that over to Activision. For what? Money. Suddenly their games were rushed, stories were scrapped, What was sold to us was entirely unfinished. And instead of fixing it, these guys are selling it back to us as DLC. At this point, they have completely shed the loyalty that they once felt for the audiences that built them to what they were at the time. And that's not the Bungie that anybody
Yeah, but still, at one point, at least this Steam one was a decent game.
recognized. All it took was one game in 4 years for them to become that. And then came the microtransactions. What happened to We Are Our Players? It's always funny when I hear that from developers where they say that they share our...
Well, most players buy the sloppy microtransactions. That's why they do it, okay? Listen, League of Legends is selling $250 skins. How many $250 skins does League of Legends have? They're gonna push that price up to 1,000 at some point. Jesus Christ.
Our perspective, how many developers pay for microtransactions in their own games? I'd really like to know. Actually, you don't need to tell me because I already know. As somebody that's been sponsored by video games in the past, I know that to them, it's just a button press on the back end. They don't know what it's like. It's money to us. To them, it's nothing. And that's the moment that Bungie lost perspective of their players. They stopped being us, and they started preying on us. When Destiny 2 launched in 2017, it was clear that Bungie had learned from at least some of their mistakes. Cutting support from the first game so quickly was frustrating for a lot of players, but the sequel was a massive improvement. The story was much more coherent, the campaign was cinematic, the launch was packed with content, there was more planets, better boss fights, and more weapons. It wasn't perfect, but it was far sharper in every way, and it let players feel genuinely optimistic about the future. But that optimism would be wasted. Because not long after launch, players discovered that Bungie was secretly throttling XP gains to slow down how quickly players could earn Eververse rewards. On paper,
Good.
XP should be used to be able to unlock free loot boxes containing cosmetic items, but in practice, Bungie had built a system deliberately limiting how often players could earn those rewards without paying. Now, this was just the start because while the game felt content-rich at the start, the cracks started to show pretty quickly. Endgame progression was incredibly shallow, but that was by design because only 3 months later, Bungie rolled out a $20 DLC and offered almost nothing, a single story mission, a strike, and a few scraps of content. It was the same cynical playbook that they had for Destiny 1's early expansions, and it confirmed what players were already starting to believe, that Bungie was not the beloved studio that they once were. They were a greedy one. By 2019, Bungie had shifted Destiny 2 to a free-to-play model, at least in name. In reality, multiple expansions had already been out, so the cost of the full experience of the game was well over $80 at the time. Players could access a base layer of content, but most weapons, raids, and campaigns were locked behind paywalls. Free-to-play was nothing more than a marketing label, and the worst part about all that paid content is that it wasn't even yours. In 2020, with the...
There's, by the way, people who are still trying to fight that notion, people who do not believe that that's even true. There's no point in arguing with them. They're idiots.
Launch of Beyond Light, Bungie vaulted nearly half of Destiny 2's content. Expansions players had paid for, entire campaigns like the Red War, Curse of Osiris, and Warmind, gone. Whole planets were deleted, exotic quests...
Sunsetting. Probably the funniest fucking thing ever. Bungie saying, guys, we have so much content we can't actually allow you all to play it. And then it's like, okay, so I'm gonna buy this expansion. What do I get? Well, you bought the expansion, thank you, no refunds, but we sunset all of the expansion. That is the best thing ever, by the way. The fact that you can buy an expansion and half of the fucking expansion is sunset. That's probably the funniest thing ever, honestly. Oh, man, and people will defend us. World of Warcraft has a lot of content, but you have Chromie time and shit at least, okay? You can revisit whatever absolute low testosterone expansion you ever want. My God, you know, the only thing I'm sad about with Bungie is the fact that maybe Marathon is gonna never be delivered. I really want to laugh how absolutely woke and trash Marathon is.
Weapons and activities had vanished, all in the name of streamlining the experience. Bungie had claimed that it was necessary for technical reasons to introduce new systems and reduce file size, but no MMO or other live service game has ever done anything like this. It devalued years of support, erased content people had purchased, and it had made it feel like Bungie was forcing players forward into new expansions, whether they liked it or not. Now, you think after vaulting half of the game, Bungie would try to repair their relationship with their players, but instead of that, they just doubled down. The Witch Queen expansion was absolutely brilliant. God, I love that expansion so much. But underneath it came $20 paywall dungeons and expansion prices that crept up past the cost of a brand new game.
Is the Witch Queen the best expansion ever in most people's eyes, by the way? I have a feeling it's Witch Queen. Then the worst is by far Lightfall. And that's pretty much it.
In 2023, after Sony bought them, I thought that they would actually improve. I think a lot of people thought that they would, but things only got worse. Seasons got locked behind $10 to $15 paywalls, obfuscated through silver bundles that were always forcing you to overpay for them, followed by paywalled exotics, paid campaign skips, and an Eververse store that just kept ratcheting up prices while locking more cosmetics away. And through all of this, Bungie still had the nerve to market Destiny.
You know what's my favorite part about these in-game stores? They don't want to call it the cash shop. They don't want to call it a real money transaction house. They call it the Eververse. Buy things in the Eververse. Oh, how much is this? Oh no, this is not $50. This is 5,000 sparkly bucks. Yes. I love how every game actually does it. It's sublime.
As a free-to-play game when it clearly isn't. The most frustrating part of all of this is that despite all of its flaws, Destiny 2 can have some incredibly high points. That's why people keep coming back to it. Expansions like Lightfall in 2023 pushed the game over 300,000 concurrent players on Steam, and Episode 1 Echoes sparked a similar surge. The game can be amazing when it delivers. The gunplay is unmatched. The raids are some of the best in the industry, and that's why people care enough to be angry in the first place. But the erratic quality combined with Bungie's obsession with squeezing their players for all they're worth has left this game feeling hollow. That's why the game now sits at 25,000 concurrent players on Steam right now, its lowest ever. And honestly, who could blame anybody for leaving? Destiny 2 costs over $400 if you want access to the full game. It's locking.
I would say that this is. Oh, you can't see. I would say that this is $500, not $400. But you know, that's maybe just me.
Content behind.
Oh, this is with Oh, that's just only but $12. Okay. Well, $12 is $12.
Expansions.
I love, by the way, how they're like, okay, buy the NFA, guys. It's on 30% discount, and nothing else is discounted. It's you gotta love it. How many of these, by the way, expansions are even worth playing? How many of them have been absolutely gutted by sunsetting at this point? Those are things I honestly wonder.
It can vanish at any time while still asking for money at every turn. This is not the Bungie that made Halo. That's obvious now. Most of the original staff is gone, lost to layoffs, creative differences, scandals, or burnout, or whatever else. And what's left is just...
Yeah, well, I mean, this is literally now modern day Bungie, I guess, honestly. So, that's pretty much it. That was Legendary Drops, 10 out of 10. Bye!